On a cold morning in the early 1970s, a man stood at a small airport in Wisconsin. He had just walked away from a good job, doing research at a big company. He had no plan. A stranger started talking to him. The stranger's name was Bob Gellerman. He owned a small company called Wisconsin Marine. It made snow throwers under the name Bobcat. Business was bad, and it was getting worse. Half joking, Gellerman said the man should just buy the company. The man's name was Dane Skag, and he said yes. Within 2 years, he nearly lost everything he owned. That one small decision at an airport would lead to 3 separate mower companies, 3 big sales, and a pattern that repeated for the rest of his life. Every week on this channel, we tell the story behind the brands and the machines that built the working world. If that's your kind of story, subscribe now, because this one has a physicist who built and sold 3 separate companies on purpose, one after another. Dane Skag was not a mechanic. He never grew up in a family garage covered in grease. He earned his degree in physics and mathematics from North Central College, then a master's in physics from the University of Illinois. He joined the teaching and research staff at Princeton, where he was offered tenure and even the chance to direct the newly opened Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory. He turned both down for a job at Alice Chalmers, a Milwaukee manufacturer, designing high-energy X-ray machines for military use. Later, as vice president of research at McGraw-Edison, he first got his hands on commercial lawnmowers. That was the job he quit without knowing what came next. When Gellerman told him about the little snow thrower business in Lake Mills, Wisconsin, something clicked. Skag saw it the way a scientist sees an unsolved problem. He did not know engines well, and did not know how mower dealers worked, but he understood how systems fit together and how to take something apart, find what was broken, and fix it. Wisconsin Marine had started back in 1940. At first, it built boat hoists and floating docks for lakes. In 1950, the company added 2-stage snow throwers. For 20 years, that was the whole business. It was small and seasonal, and by the time Skag bought it, it was struggling badly. He believed a well-built machine would sell itself. That belief was wrong. A business that only sells snow throwers only makes money when it snows, just a few months each year. And within 2 years, Skag was nearly broke. The lesson hit him hard. A great machine is not a great business if it only works part of the year. So he changed direction. Wisconsin Marine already had a small mower sold under the Bobcat name, and Skag pushed it hard into lawn equipment instead of snow gear. He added a 12-inch trimmer mower, a 21-inch push mower, and a full line of walk-behind and riding mowers. This was the real turning point. Not one clever invention, but a choice to stop depending on snow and start building machines people needed all year long. That single choice turned a business surviving on luck into one with year-round demand. Those early Bobcat mowers were built simple and tough on purpose. They used grease fittings on the wheels so a mechanic could service them in minutes, and the deck was thick cast metal, not thin sheet steel that could bend or crack. None of this was flashy. It was just built to survive years of hard, daily work on real job sites. A landscaper did not want a mower that looked nice for one season. He wanted one that would still start on a cold morning 5 years later. Then, in 1974, a fire tore through the factory. For a company already fighting to survive, a fire like that could have been the end. Instead, Wisconsin Marine rebuilt. By 1975, they were back, selling the same growing mower lineup. By 1979, they had bought 40 acres of land in Johnson Creek, Wisconsin, and built a new 90,000 square foot factory. All of the company's scattered buildings moved under one roof, and the new road leading to the plant was even named Bobcat Lane. This was no longer a shaky side business run out of desperation. It had become a real, respected mower maker, one that caught the eye of a much bigger company overseas. That bigger company was Ransom's, Sims, and Jeffries, an old British machinery maker with roots going back to the 1780s, founded in 1789 by an ironmonger named Robert Ransom, casting plowshares in Ipswich, England. By the time it came calling on a struggling mower shop in Wisconsin, it was a giant with nearly 2 centuries behind it. To help pay for the new Johnson Creek factory, Skag sold Ransom's a share of Wisconsin Marine. It made sense at the time. Building a modern factory takes real money, and Ransom's had plenty of it. But that deal came with a hidden cost. In 1981, Ransom's came back and bought the rest of the company outright. They formed a new company called Ransom's America. The same money that built the factory and made Bobcat a serious competitor was the money that eventually took the whole company out of Skag's hands. He had built something strong enough that someone else wanted to own it completely, and once it did, he no longer owned it. This is the pattern to watch closely, because it happens 2 more times. Dane Skag never set out to hold on to a company forever. In a later interview, he explained his own thinking in plain words. What he loved was research and design, not running a business day after day, and every time his hope was to sell the company and stay on as the designer, doing the part of the job he actually enjoyed. That is exactly what happened with Bobcat. He sold his shares, spent a few years close to the industry doing design work, and once that chapter closed, moved on to build something brand new. What he built next started with almost nothing. No factory, no manufacturing line of his own, just a design in his head, and enough nerve to get in a truck and sell it directly to the people who would use it. Skag went on a long sales trip across the country. He showed off his new 3-wheel mowing tractor to dealers and landscape contractors one town at a time. By the time he got home, he had sold 1,600 machines. He still did not have a factory to build a single one. That sales trip was not easy. Skag drove from dealer to dealer with no factory behind him and no guarantee anyone would say yes. He set the mower down in gravel lots and cornfields and let contractors kick the tires and ask hard questions. Some were skeptical of a 3-wheel design from a man they had never heard of, but once they saw it cut grass and handle rough ground, the doubts faded fast. So instead of building his own plant, he made a handshake deal with a company called Metalcraft of Mayville. They would build the machines to his design. He would design them, market them, and sell them. There was no long negotiation and no thick contract, just an agreement between 2 men who trusted each other enough to shake hands on it. That simple deal became the foundation of Skag Power Equipment, founded around 1982 or 1983. That handshake deal tells you something important about how Skag thought about business. He never wanted to own factories. He wanted to own ideas. To him, manufacturing was something you handed off to people who were good at it. Design was the part that mattered, where a physicist's mind gave him a real edge over a typical machine shop owner. At Skag Power Equipment, he introduced the 3-wheel mowing tractor, then followed it with a dual-drive hydro walk mower and a series of riding mower designs. The industry gave him the OEMIE Award in 1990, one of the highest honors in outdoor power equipment, voted on by people working across the industry rather than handed out by advertisers or company insiders. Winning it meant his designs were respected by people who had no reason to be kind about it. None of this worked without dealers who trusted him. Steve Redan, chairman of KPM, started distributing for Skag in 1986 and called him a clever, ingenious man, the kind who could look at a piece of equipment and picture a better version almost right away. Dealers loved working with him because he actually listened. If a dealer suggested a change to a mower, Skag would often make it happen, then remind that dealer, months later, what he had done for them. It built real loyalty, and dealers felt like they had a hand in shaping the machines they sold. The parts system mattered just as much as the machines themselves. A mower that breaks down on a Tuesday is useless if the part could not arrive until Friday, so dealers kept common parts on hand, and contractors could walk in, grab a belt or a blade, and get back to work the same day. That kind of quick support was built into how Skag ran his business from the start, a big reason dealers stayed loyal for decades. In 1986, Metalcraft bought Skag Power Equipment outright. The company that had quietly built every machine under a handshake deal became the company that owned the whole brand. Skag stayed on as president through 1991, still designing and leading the business he had founded, but the ownership had already changed hands behind him. It is the same story that played out with Ransoms, just with a different partner on the other side of the deal. Build something valuable enough, and sooner or later, the person holding the other half of the arrangement ends up holding all of it. In 1991, Skag walked away from the company that carried his own name. He was not finished, not even close. In 1996, at an age when most people are long retired, he started over again. He founded Great Dane Power Equipment and built a new plant in Jeffersonville, Indiana, in a brand new state, far from Wisconsin and far from Metalcraft. There was no old partner nearby, and no leftover ties to the company he had just left. It was a clean start, just like Skag Power Equipment had been after Bobcat. There, in his late 70s, he introduced something the commercial mower world had never seen before. It was a stand-on mower called the Surfer. Up until then, commercial mowers came in two types. You either walked behind them or you sat down and rode them. The Surfer let an operator stand upright on a small platform behind the cutting deck. That gave better visibility, faster turns, and far less strain on the body than walking behind a mower for a 10-hour shift, day after day. It was the very first stand-on mower in the industry. It earned Skag his second OEMIE award. The idea was simple once you saw it working. Standing lets an operator step on and off in seconds, instead of climbing down from a seat. It also shifts the operator's weight forward, which helps the mower grip hills and wet grass better than a rider could. Simple idea, huge difference for a crew mowing dozens of properties in a single day. Stop and think about what that means. A man in his 70s, after building and losing 2 companies already, was still inventing a brand new category of machine. This was not a young engineer chasing his first big idea. This was someone who had already proven himself twice and still had one more idea left inside him. Great Dane followed the same path as the 2 companies before it. Skag built something genuinely new, something that mattered to the people who used it all day, contractors who spent entire summers riding or standing on a mower deck and cared deeply about comfort, speed, and control. Once Great Dane became valuable enough, it caught the attention of a much bigger buyer. In December of 2000, John Deere bought Great Dane Power Equipment, not a small contract manufacturer or a mid-sized British firm this time, but one of the largest farm and industrial equipment makers on Earth, folding Skag's third invention into its product line. Picture what a normal week looked like for the people who used these machines. A landscaping crew loaded 3 or 4 Skag mowers onto a trailer before sunrise. By 9, the mowers were running back-to-back across lawns, parks, and business properties. By evening, the crew wiped them down and loaded them back on for the next morning. These were not hobby machines sitting in a garage. They were work tools, expected to run 5 or 6 days a week for years without failing. 3 companies, 3 sales, 3 very different buyers, a British machinery firm, a Wisconsin contract manufacturer, and an American industrial giant. Each time, Skag built something people genuinely needed, earned the trust of the dealers and workers who depended on it, and walked away once the price on the table meant more to someone else than it did to him. So what actually happened to all 3 of these companies? Here's the surprising part. None of them disappeared. That is what makes this story different from so many others about lost American manufacturers. Bobcat still exists today as a brand. It passed through Schiller Ground's care for years, then moved again in a 2019 deal to Doosan Bobcat, the paperwork changing hands twice more, while the mowers kept rolling off the line. Skag Power Equipment is still running, still a division of Metalcraft of Mayville, and by its own account remains one of the largest independent makers of commercial mowing equipment in the country. Great Dane's designs carried on inside John Deere's larger operation. Stand-on mowers, the idea Skag introduced with the Surfer, are now a standard category across the industry, and nearly every major mower maker builds one today. Every single brand survived. What did not survive, in each case, was Dane Skag's personal ownership of what he had built. Today, collectors and old mechanics still hunt down early Bobcat and Skag machines. Some restore them for fun, others keep using them for real work because the parts are still simple enough to rebuild by hand. Old forums are full of stories about finding a rusty Bobcat mower under a tarp, pulling the cord, and watching it start on the first try. That happens because the machines were built with plain, replaceable parts instead of sealed pieces meant to be thrown away. That difference matters. It is the honest answer to the question this story keeps circling back to. Skag never lost a fight to keep his companies. He never went bankrupt, never watched a factory get shut down under him, and never saw his life's work sold off in a hostile takeover. What happened was simpler than that, and in its own way, more remarkable. Every single time, he built something people wanted badly enough to pay for it in full, while all he ever wanted was to keep designing the next machine. He held more than 24 patents across his career, but owning a patent for a design is not the same thing as owning the company that sells it. He kept inventing. Other people kept buying? Skag was also a lifelong pilot who often flew himself out to demonstrate new machines to customers, the same restless habit that had put him at a small airport decades earlier and started the whole story. Dane Skag died on August 9th, 2013, at the age of 94. Even at the end, his identity as a scientist stayed front and center. He gave his home and 75 acres of land in Colorado to North Central College, his old school, and set up a scholarship there, not for business students or engineering managers, but for students studying the sciences. That was the same identity that had started this whole story decades earlier at a small Wisconsin airport, a physicist who ended up in the mower business almost by accident and then never really left it. Picture one of his machines running right now. A dealer somewhere in the Midwest pulls the starter cord on an old Bobcat mower, decades old, and it still fires up because someone kept it maintained and the parts were built to be replaced instead of thrown away. Or picture a landscaper today standing upright on a Great Dane surfer, a design that did not exist until a man in his 70s decided that walking behind a mower all day was a problem worth solving. Every one of those machines still carries a piece of Dane Skag's thinking, even though his name no longer appears on the ownership papers of any of the 3 companies he built. Somewhere else, a young worker climbs onto a mower for the very first time, learning on a machine built from an idea that started at a Wisconsin airport more than 50 years ago. That is the real answer hiding behind the title. He built 3 separate lawn mower empires, and in the plainest sense of the word, he did sell every one of them. But nothing he made actually disappeared. The machines are still running today, the brands are still selling, and the dealers are still stocking parts for them. What changed hands each time was never the knowledge behind the design, since that stayed locked inside every product that rolled off those lines. What changed hands was simply the paperwork that said who got to call it theirs. Dane Skag spent his career proving that building something and owning it are 2 different things, and by the end of his life he had proven it 3 times on 3 machines with 3 names on the door. If you want more stories about the people who built things worth taking, subscribe to the channel. There's another one next week.